So, good morning, all of you, those of whom have found a time to attend my class. Uh, so, what I'm going to do is I'm going to first go back and go through walk you through the Friedman's quantity restatement of quantity theory, uh, which should take about 10 to 15 minutes. And then I will turn to the new topic, which is policy making, the new classical economics and policy making. Okay.
So is this part under classical or neoclassical?
This quantity theory,
Yes, sir, this restatement portion.
this is the monetarist counter revolution. So you can say that if you think of it chronologically, you have the classical economics of Marshall, Pigou, Wicksell. Then you had the Keynesian school. From the 60s onwards, you have the criticism of the Keynesian school. Uh, there are different branches of this criticism. One branch is the monetarist school. The other branch is the new classical, not neoclassical, new classical. So they are approaching the using the classical approach, but uh, it's not completely the classical approach. You will see that there are some differences in expectations or information. Simultaneously, the Keynesians too were evolving, and you had the new Keynesians, which I have not covered. So you can think of it in this way. Classicals, Marshall, Pigou, Wicksell. Then you had the depression, which led to the emergence of the Keynesian school. From the sorry, Keynesian school, you have the criticism became you have the critics. One, mainly led by Friedman, and on the other hand, you have the so this is based on the classicals were based on perfect information. So all the agents knew what was happening in the economy. Keynes used price expectations, backward looking and static price expectations, which are very slow to react. So the criticism was in two ways. The monetarist who attacked the assumption of constant velocity of money. V is a, they argued, V can be treated as a constant, and this will lead to different conclusions from the Keynesian approach. And side by side, what you had was you had the new Keynesians who were relaxing the and while this was going on, just sorry. And while this was going on, you had the so they were a critic of the you can see the mainstream macroeconomic approach. Both of the monetarists, the new classicals, and the new Keynesians. Over here, again, you can argue that you have the I would say it's something like this. So the limitations of the neoclassicals the rational expectation model has led to the emergence of an alternative approach based on adaptive expectations. So this is to some extent, well, I'm not, these are not really coming into the textbook at this moment. It is a criticism, but to some extent it's it's using the, you can say it's more in line with the new Keynesian approach. So it would, I would say it lies between, in the intersection of these two. Okay. Okay, so is it clear or even more confusing?
No, sir, it's clear.
Okay, so the important thing is that the assumptions about wage and price rigidity, that is an important part. But the information, assumptions made about information is also important. The classicals assumed that all agents had perfect information. They knew what price is going to be, so they simply have to set W. They know what price is, so they know what real wages will be. In Keynesian school, price expectation, they don't know what they don't have perfect information, so agents don't know what price will be, so they formulate an expectation about price. Expected price is simply the weighted sum of previous prices, and it is backward looking based on previous prices, and it is static, very slow to change. So if you want to analyze policies, as you have seen, you can assume price expectations to be constant. So this assumption was criticized. The Keynesian school was criticized by monetarists. They argued that V is not a variable, it is a constant. So you can go back to the quantity theory formulation. The new classical approach, on the other hand, focused on rational expectations, which we are coming to in this class. Side by side, you had the neo-Keynesians who were gradually relaxing the assumptions, the strict assumptions of the Keynesian school. And as a result of this, they were moving closer to the old classical approach, classical or neoclassical approach. So we are having a convergence. Okay? And side by side, you had the structuralist approach, where the focus was on mainly the supply side or demand side constraints, which are imposed by the structural features of the economy. So this approach, for instance, is very useful in analyzing the economic policies or the economic conditions existing in less developed countries like India, developing countries, less developed countries. So Mihir Rokhit, for instance, wrote his book Labor Surplus Economy using this structuralist approach. Okay. So I'll take better put this over here. Now, where is the quantity theory? Okay. So Friedman's restatement of the classical quantity theory starts by making the following propositions. Firstly, the demand for money was stable. Okay, so this boils down to that the velocity of money, V, or which is equal to 1 by K, is constant. The second proposition was that the interest elasticity of money was not infinite, but very low. This implies that the LM curve will be nearly vertical. Okay, so the Keynesian school assumed that the interest elasticity of money was infinite, which means that the LM curve will be horizontal, parallel to the x-axis, or nearly so. Friedman moved to the other extreme. It's almost vertical. So given these two propositions, it is possible to use the Cambridge version of the quantity theory of money. MD is equal to KPY. Demand for money is equal to K, which is equal to 1 by V, price into real income. Or in other words, K into nominal income. So this is a theory of demand for money. But if K becomes a constant, then in equilibrium, it is also a theory of determining nominal income. Okay, K is constant and money supply is set by the monetary authorities. So in that case, we can write MV becomes a constant. So depending upon the value of M, you have a certain value of nominal income. The classicals had assumed that money was simply a medium of exchange. You require money only to undertake transactions. The only demand for money is for the transaction demand. Keynes included the liquidity preference, the role of money as an asset. So that means what agents do is they compare the returns to holding money vis-a-vis returns to holding other assets. By other assets, he combines all of them into one aggregate asset, bonds. So households have to choose between allocating the wealth between money and bonds. If the bond return is high, they are going to transfer money from their wealth from the liquid form, money, into bonds. On the other hand, if they feel that bonds are going to yield low returns, then they are going to shift the wealth back from bonds to money. Okay. So, Keynes said that V cannot be held to be a constant. V is a function of R. So that means K is also a function of R. V is a negative function. Sorry, V is a positive function of R. And K, which is 1 by R, will therefore become a negative function of R. Okay. So that means in this equation, K is no longer a constant. So given the value of money supply, okay, given the value of money supply, let me add this. Let us say M is equal to 100. Okay. It's no longer possible to determine nominal income from the quantity theory. The reason is that at equilibrium, we have 100 V is equal to Py. Okay, so for simplicity, let us say Py is defined as small y. So depending upon the value of V, your nominal income will change. If V is, let us say, 1, nominal income will be 100. If V is 2, nominal income will be 200. So the classicals had said that if you can determine 100, the money supply, if you can determine money supply, you know what nominal income is. You know what Y is. But if, as Keynes argued, V becomes a variable, given money supply, you can no longer say what will be the level of nominal income. Is this clear, everyone? Or will I repeat it?
Sir, I can.
Okay. Okay, একটু আমাকে টিস্যু পেপারটা লাগিয়ে দিতে দাও। See, the classical theory is that V is a constant. Okay. You have MD is equal to KPY. MS equal to M bar. It is set by the central bank. Okay. Okay. So when the money market is in equilibrium, MD is equal to MS. So you have KPY is equal to M bar. Or what we can write as both of them are constant, but this is set by central bank. Okay, now just let us use a shorthand. This is nominal income. Small y is nominal income, which is equal to defined as Py. Okay. So what we have is this. Achha. Let us take an example. Let us say V bar is 2. Okay. So now, if the money supply is 100, what is nominal income?
200.
See, this is V bar, this is 2, and this is the money supply. This is 100. So what will be nominal income?
200, sir. So 200.
Achha. If you increase money supply to, let us say, 250, what is nominal income?
500.
আচ্ছা, মানি সাপ্লাইকে যদি তোমরা কমিয়ে দাও, if you reduce money supply to 50,
100.
it becomes 100. ঠিক আছে? So if V bar is constant, then for any level of M bar, you know what is nominal income. Right? So the demand for money becomes a theory for determining Y. You can change money supply and nominal income will change accordingly. See, you're changing money supply over here and nominal income is changing accordingly. Okay. Now you have Keynes. Keynes is saying V is a variable, right? So in the equilibrium condition, we have right. এইবারে তোমরা বলো, you have the three levels of money supply equal to 100, equal to 250, equal to 50. What is Y in this case? So suppose money supply is 100. What will be the nominal income?
Sir, it depends on the value of V. Like, as it is variable, we cannot just say a exact value.
Okay. So let us say take three values. তাহলে V equal to 1 হলে কি হবে?
100,
100.
এখানে 250 হলে
250,
this is 50. এখানে
200,
200.
then
500.
and
100.
100,
300.
then
750.
750,
and
150.
150.
আচ্ছা, so what you can see that the same level of money supply can support different levels of nominal income. Okay, depending upon the velocity of money. So even if the income is 100, if the velocity of money is 1, the money market will be in equilibrium. If nominal income increases to 200 and the velocity of money also goes up to 2, money market is still in equilibrium. So now the one-to-one relation between M and small y the one-to-one relation between money supply and nominal income is broken. Once you hold, if V becomes a variable, as in the Keynesian model, you no longer have a one-to-one relation between money supply and nominal income. Okay. So we cannot determine what is nominal income given money supply. Okay, so now we have two approaches. If V is held constant, you have a one-to-one relation. If V is a variable, you don't have a one-to-one relation. Right. So if V is a constant, then this implies okay. So this was the approach of Marshall, Pigou, and others, the classicals. And this also formed, as you will see, the basis for Friedman's restatement. But if V is a variable, we still have equality. But remember that, note that the bar over here is missing. So no one-to-one relation between so for the same level of money supply, we can have different levels of Py corresponding to the value of what?
Velocity.
Okay, so this is the Keynesian approach. Okay, you can see over here that money supply is 100, but depending upon the value of V, you have different levels of nominal income. So now you have to know both money supply and velocity of money. If you just know velocity of money, well, this will also not help you, because depending on money supply, your output can change. So you have to know what is V at a particular moment. You have to know what is money supply at a particular moment. They jointly determine what is the level of nominal income. But in case of the classical theory, since V is a constant, the monetary authorities will set money supply, and given this value, whatever it is, automatically you're going to get a corresponding level of nominal income. Okay. So is it clear?
Yes, sir.
So
May I move on to the next slide? I mean,
Yes.
Yes, sir.
okay. I've covered these slides before. I'm just repeating since it's almost 1 week. Okay. So Friedman stated that the money demand function is, see, L is the liquidity, okay, Py, which is the same as Keynes. He brought in R, but the R was split up into 3 parts: bonds, equities, and durable commodities. Just like Keynes, the L derivative with respect to rate of interest will be negative. If the returns to any asset rises, you will transfer wealth from money holdings to that particular asset. So the classical form was MD equal to KPY. So this is just a function of P and Y. The Keynesian function was so how does Friedman's theory differ from the classical form?
So it is an equality rather than a identity.
No, just look at the function. Look at this part and look at this part. This is Friedman's.
R like Keynesian is like it has rate of interest. It depends on
Yeah. So over here, it's a function of income only. But here it is a function of income and interest rate. But what is the difference from the Keynesian case?
So Keynes considered all assets as bonds.
In case of Keynes, you only have one alternative asset. Therefore, you have only one rate of interest. Here he is saying that you should not combine all the assets, but keep them separate. So you have multiple interest rates. So would you say that Friedman is close to the classical, or is it close to Keynes?
Keynes.
Yeah, so far it is close to Keynes. Then Friedman argues that so the Cambridge equation can be restated as MD is equal to K, which is a function of all the rates of interest, and PY, right? The pure Cambridge equation was, sorry, this should be D. This is the Cambridge equation. So Keynes said that you can write this LR form in this way. Okay, so this still means that money demand is a function of the 3 rates of interest, and this is price and this is income. This is just a functional form of the model. So the functional form was similar to the Cambridge equation. Achha. So when you are taking it in this, writing it in this form, K is not a variable. Sorry, K is not a constant. It depends upon the 3 rates of interest. If any of the rates of interest goes up, then K is going to fall. Okay, so that means K is negative. This is the assumption. If any R goes up, K will fall. So K prime is negative, and because K prime is equal to 1 by V prime will be positive. Okay? Okay. Okay, so what is the equilibrium in the condition in the money market? Money supply is equal to money demand. Money demand is given by this form. So the equilibrium condition is simply right. Okay.
Sir, could you show the previous slide once?
This one.
No, sir. Quantity. So the slide before Friedman and Keynes. Sir, the last slide where you had.
আচ্ছা ঠিক আছে, এখান থেকে আমি স্টার্ট করছি, not this slide.
No, sir. No, sir. No, sir. No, sir. Yes, sir. This one. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Okay. So let us say that the money demand function is stable. Okay. If the money demand function is stable, and let us say that there's an increase in money supply. So if there's an increase in money supply, you now have, I'm not writing the full form. You now have this is the money demand function. You have excess supply in the money market. Okay. So money supply has increased, you are not reducing it. So in order to restore equilibrium, your money demand must increase, right? If money demand increases, then you are going to have this is going to be regained. Okay. Now you can divide this up into two components. The money demand can be divided into two components. One is the K component, the other is the nominal income part. If money demand increases, this can be either because nominal income has gone up or K has increased, right? If K increased, that means how will this occur? What will happen to R?
So it will
Given that
decrease.
it's a negative. Exactly. ঠিক আছে? So this will exert an indirect effect. If R declines, this is again going to affect nominal income because investment will change. R decrease hole ki hobe? What will happen to investment?
It will rise.
Increase.
So this will again stimulate this nominal income. Okay. So if money supply goes up, initially there will be excess supply in the money market. However, the money market will come back to equilibrium. There, you can say two direct channels and one indirect channel. These are the direct channels. Py will immediately go up and k will also go up. Now, in order for k to go up, r must fall, and this will stimulate investment, which will lead to nominal income rising. Okay. So, this and this are the direct effects, and this is the indirect effect. Okay, now what what Friedman does is to assume k is a function of right. Now suppose I is basically E, B, and D. Okay. I'm not writing the three equations. Suppose this key function is almost equal to 0. So if rate of interest changes, k will change, but it will change marginally. So suppose I'm just giving an example. So suppose rate of interest changes by 1%. K will change by, let us say, this much. Will you expect the change in K to have any major impact on the economy? K is changing, right? We are not saying that K is constant. But for all practical purpose, we can say that K is approximately equal to 0. K changes by such a slight margin that it does not induce any major change on the economy. Do you understand what I'm saying?
So the change is so small that it does not affect the economy in general, right?
Yeah. So in that case, even though it's a variable, it's changing, I can assume it to be constant. And that assumption will be fairly realistic. I mean, suppose I ask you to solve a problem, and your answer is that income is suppose this should be the answer, and your answer is this is decimal, okay? Strictly speaking, is your answer correct? Strictly speaking, if I want to make a fine distinction.
No, sir.
But if I base policy making on this, will I be wrong?
No, sir.
So this is what Friedman is saying, that if you want to be 100% correct, yeah, you should hold k to be a variable and you will get a value like this. But if you assume that k is a constant, yeah, your answer will be wrong. But the difference will be so small that it will not matter. I mean, in order to get this, you're going to get this answer in minutes. But in order to get such a fine answer, which will not make a difference, maybe you'll have to spend an entire day calculating. Okay. So there's no point in going for such fine tuning when there's no gain in terms of policy making. You will get everything same. So so Friedman says that, okay, although K is a variable over here, if we make this assumption, this is almost zero, then this is approximately true. K is approximately a constant. So in that case, instead of the quantity, what do you have? You had M equal to K Py. So now you can write which is back to the Cambridge form. This is exactly what the Cambridge economists had written. I mean, the difference between this and this is so small that it doesn't have any effect. Clear, everyone? So, Friedman starts off by taking up the Keynesian form, but he shows that if you make this assumption, this is the crucial assumption. In that case, you can use the Cambridge form easily without making any gross error. Okay. So this is one assumption, and the second assumption is this. In fact, it follows from the assumption that this assumption. Okay. Because now you can see that if you take money demand, what is money demand? This is K into Py. So if we differentiate this with respect to R, what do you get? What is the value of this? Is there any R over here?
No, sir, because we have assumed K to be constant.
Yeah. So this also becomes 0. In fact, technically what happens is, this is K into Py. So what this will be equal to this is almost 0. Therefore, this will also become almost 0. And the LM curve becomes nearly vertical. Okay, so the LM curve is vertical. So this is the first assumption made by Friedman. The second proposition of Friedman is that the investment is interest sensitive. The classicals made the Keynes made exactly the opposite assumption. Keynes said that, okay, investment does depend on rate of interest, but given that it is depression time, if you change the cost of borrowing, investment will not change. Okay. Friedman said that no, assets are not homogeneous. So if interest rate changes, the impact is going to operate through multiple channels, durable commodities, bonds, equities, and as a result of this, your investment is going to change, and it's going to change sharply. So in this case, if money supply goes up, your LM curve will shift outwards, and you can see that the income is increasing sharply. Income is going up a lot. Okay. Over here, you can see that as money supply is changing, the supply of the aggregate demand curve is shifting, and you move along the income curve, aggregate supply curve. So both prices and income is going to go up. Okay. So money supply is important in determining income. It has an effect in the ISLM model. So the aggregate demand changes, and therefore, given that aggregate supply is upward sloping, output is also going to rise.
So could you explain this part once again?
Okay. But in that case, let me go back to the Keynesian case. See, Keynes assumed that the LM curve was nearly vertical. Okay, it's better if I Okay, so this part is the Keynesian part. Okay. So Keynes is assuming that K is a variable. Okay. This is the first assumption. So the money demand function is a function of R and Y. Further, LR is nearly infinite. The elasticity is very high. So that means, sorry. Okay. This will be the LM curve. LM curve is more or less horizontal. And the second assumption is I is vertical. Vertical I means this is zero. If interest rate changes, investment is not going to go up because it is depression times. Demand is the determining factor. Okay. So look at what has happened over here. Money supply has gone up. Okay, so we shift to a new LM curve. But what is the impact on Y? Y increases, but it is only, we only have a marginal increase in Y. Okay. So it is depression time. So the aggregate supply is vertical. So this is the aggregate demand. when the money supply is M0. So if money supply has gone up, how will the aggregate demand curve shift? Will it change? See, what we are doing is your price has not changed. Okay, you have two levels of income over here. Sorry, it's not very easy to draw it. Okay, so for the same price, your income has gone up, but it has gone up by a very small amount. So that means your aggregate demand curve will be like this. So what happens? There's no increase in price. Income does go up, but the increase is marginal. So money supply is effective or ineffective?
Sir, ineffective.
Ineffective.
Yeah. It fails to increase output substantially. Okay. Now we come to Friedman. Friedman first assumption is K is nearly constant. So money demand, which is a function of R, I'm just writing it in simple form. This can be approximated as K bar into Py. So that means the money demand function, the LR, is nearly zero. So nearly zero means this will be the LM curve. I'm making it a bit extreme, okay? And it should not come over here. It's almost vertical, but in fact, on second thoughts, it's better not to. Oh. পুরোটাই চলে গেল। I forgot to save it. Anyway, I'll draw it and give it to you again. So this is the LM curve. You can see it has got a very high slope. Now the IS curve is almost horizontal. So Friedman first is LM is nearly vertical, and the reason is that MD is equal to K into Py equal to KPy, which implies LR is nearly zero. Okay, so we have a particular assumption about MD, and I'm not talking about the head. The other is the IS curve is nearly horizontal. So that means IR is. So in case of the Keynesian type, it was exactly the opposite. This was infinite and this was close to zero. This was Keynes you can see they have gone to the other extreme. So now if money supply goes up, it's a horrible curve, but I hope you understand. So this is the LM with M1, this is the LM with M0. You can see that money supply has gone up by a much larger amount. Okay. Now because it is not depression time, you have the aggregate supply, and now you can see that the aggregate demand has gone up. Okay, so now money supply is effective. It can increase income. Okay. So the orthodox Keynesians argued that money supply was completely ineffective. It cannot increase income. Friedman reversed all the assumptions. You can see both the assumptions were turned on the head. And as a result of this, conclusion 2 was changed. Money supply now becomes effective. In fact, now it is only money supply which is effective. Obviously, the truth lies in between. The money LM curve is not perfectly horizontal, but neither it is vertical. IS curve also is neither horizontal nor vertical. Both of them, one of them is positively sloped, the other is negatively sloped. So in most cases, most of the times, it lies in between Friedman's case and Keynesian case. But depending upon in very extreme circumstances, during depression, you can see that the Keynesian, the economy, the curves will resemble the Keynesian model. In times of extreme boom, on the other hand, it will resemble what you're seeing now on the screen. Okay, so the truth lies in between. But anyway, if you're looking at fiscal policy, on the other hand, you can see that the budget deficit is there. It is funded by bond financing. So given Friedman's assumption, if there's a change in the fiscal policy, the IS curve will shift. And now you can see that the IS curve is completely ineffective. Well, not completely, but it is ineffective. There's a pretty large change in fiscal policy, but the resultant change in income is marginal. So there's an increase in G or maybe a tax cut. This, as a result of this, demand goes up and supply will go up in the short run. Money demand increases, you have excess demand. If money demand goes up, then rate of interest will rise. Now LM curve is interest inelastic. So that means R has to go up by a huge amount. When R is increasing, money demand is increasing, but very slowly. This means that when R is changing, so you require a large change in R. Now investment is interest sensitive. So that means if R goes up marginally, investment will fall substantially. Okay, but you have a very large rise in R. So what will happen? Investment will decrease even more. So there's a perfect crowding out effect. Okay. So del G is equal to minus del I. Almost. And the resultant increase in aggregate demand is almost zero. There is a positive net effect on Y, but marginal, negligible. So you have to work it out yourself. Joe, don't just read it or go through it. One is read the textbook. Secondly, draw the diagrams yourself, trying to think of the steps. Write down, take a piece of paper, draw the diagram, make a flow chart of how what is going to happen. Okay, if you can do it once, not 10 days or 1 month after, now, today when the classes end, you have to do this. Otherwise, you may do well in your written, but you will not do well in your vivas. See, macro is perhaps the toughest paper. And this third sem and fourth sem are the toughest semesters. First two sems, you don't have too much pressure. Fifth and sixth sem, again, the pressure will decrease. You won't have any pressure of the GE papers. You can concentrate on your major papers. But this year is going to be very tough on you. You are going to have additional major papers. At the same time, you are going to have the GE papers. And the specific papers that you have in in major, those are also going to be tough papers. In this semester, macro, statistics. In the next semester, econometrics. So if you feel that you can just attend the lectures, not do anything, it's fine. You'll get the shock later. So when you're covering these tough papers, go through it immediately. Otherwise, you're going to forget. Even if you have the videos, it will not help you. You have to work out everything yourself now. Take a piece of paper. See, make the assumptions. What is the classical assumption? What is the Keynesian assumption? Okay, the curves will be like this. So what are the changes going to be? Draw the diagram, make a flowchart. Then go to the Friedman case. What are the assumptions? What will be the shapes of the LM curve, IS curve? Again, make a flowchart. See what the results are. Compare between them. Work it out yourself. Okay. So, Friedman's conclusion was that Keynes was right in saying that money has some additional functions apart from the transactions demand. It is a medium. It is also an asset. But Friedman argued that, based on empirical studies, that the velocity of money is constant. And the reason is that although K does depend upon rate of interest, it is not very interest sensitive. The elasticity is very low. So that means for practical purposes, you can approximate K, a function of R, you can approximate this by K equal to K bar. At the same time, if you make the assumption that it is investment which is interest elastic, okay, in that case, you end up in a situation where monetary policy is the only effective policy, fiscal policy will not work. Okay. So monetarism became very influential in the 70s, and the peak was in the late 79. In US, the US Federal Reserve, the central bank, began its monetary experiments to control inflation. In UK, the Iron Lady adopted a monetarist approach. So who is the Iron Lady?
So Margaret Thatcher.
Yeah, Maggie Thatcher. A very nasty old woman. But by 1986, The Economist was writing is this the year monetarism vanishes? So, Friedman's, the lesson that you should understand is that there's no theory is perfect. A theory was developed in response to a particular economic context. It is valid in that particular context. So the Keynesian theory was developed during the Depression. It was valid for the Depression years. Monetarism came in response to the developments of the 1970s, when there was inflation but no growth in income. In that case, the monetarist theory would explain the events of the 70s. Okay. But these are all specific situations. As a student of economist, you should keep in mind that you have different shoes and people with different feet sizes. Some people have small feet, some people have their foot size is large. So you just cannot take a same shoe and give it to everyone. You have to identify which shoe fits the foot of that person and give him or her an appropriate shoe. So you have to keep in mind that every school, every approach has its advantages and disadvantages. The truth lies not in any one theory, but in between. So the monetarists assumed that velocity of money was stable. So this is the velocity. You can see the fluctuations in the velocity of money. See, in the 79, you can see that it is more or less stable. But look at what happened after 85. In 85, there was a pretty huge dip from around 8 to 6%. Again, look at the dip in the early 90s. These are huge dips. Then look at this part. It rose from 6 to 9. So can you say that the velocity of money is stable?
No, sir.
Well, I would say yes if I looked at this period. If I look at this period. Right?
Yes, sir. But sir,
In-
for the middle ones, like the ups
the-
and downs.
Again, for the middle ones, no. Velocity of money is not stable. So you have to remember that the economic condition is changing. If the economy is in this period, who is right, Keynes or Friedman? Between 79 and 85? From 99 to 2003? Who is right?
Sir Keynes.
Friedman.
Friedman.
Friedman is right. Velocity of money is constant. So that means if you now have the benefit of hindsight, what sort of policy will you adopt? Monetarist or fiscal?
So monetary.
You should go for monetary policy. But if you're on these portions, which I've indicated, after 90, the entire 90s, late 80s, what will you do? Who is right?
So
Keynes.
Keynes. Fiscal policy.
Fiscal
They adopted.
policy. So the important thing is, don't think that Keynes is right or Friedman is right. Both of them are right. They were right when they were writing. The point is that very often we become enamored of we fall in love with our own theory. And we feel that this is the only truth. I mean, later on when you go for the postgraduate courses, you know that Abhijit Banerjee and all, Esther Duflo, they've got the Nobel Prize for the work on the randomized controlled trials. Again, the problem is that they have become they've fallen so much in love with the theories that they are now saying that this is the only possible approach to impact evaluation. Again, this is wrong. So never fall in love with a theory. If you have to fall in love with a context, not with a theory.
Sir, but shouldn't be the target be to develop a general theory to explain all?
It would be wonderful. But see, if you want to develop a general theory, can you develop a general theory in which you make both these assumptions?
No, sir.
You also have to make both these assumptions. Investment is infinite and investment is zero. Is it possible to develop a general theory? I mean, even one would be too much. This would be too much. 1A, 1B would be too much. But 2A and 2B. So that is the problem actually. The economy, see, in the normal times, it's fine. But if you're moving to shocks, you're moving to extremities. And extremities give rise to the economic theories, not a normal situation. If everything is going fine, who will criticize you? It is only when a shock comes, your policy, your theories fail, that people will start criticizing you and look for a new explanation. At that time, you have to go make some extreme assumptions. Okay? So, having a theory which fits all situations is very nice. As I've told you that what is your foot size? Oil? কত নম্বরের জুতো পরো?
9.
Upanita, what size do you wear?
Sir, 6.
Acha. Another volunteer?
Sir, 10. Shubhayan.
Fine. So what should I do, Ayan? What does your general theory of shoes tell you? What should I do? Size 8 দিয়ে দেবো, average?
Elastic shoes.
Elastic shoes. You don't have elastic
Sir,
shoes.
sandals.
Yes?
Sir, rubber sandals.
Even rubber sandals. তোমাকে size 10 shoe rubber sandals দেবো?
Just socks.
Just socks. So no, you have to look at the foot size. Just don't think that you can buy shoes of one type and distribute it. You have to see who comes up, measure the shoe, measure the foot size, and bring out the appropriate size. So in your shop, you should have shoes or policies of different types. And when a person comes, measure the foot size, find out what is the economic policy, bring out the appropriate shoes, bring out your appropriate policies, monetary policy, fiscal policy, whatever. Okay. So realizing that velocity of money was flexible, just a minute. So realizing that V was not constant, economists, macroeconomists, policymakers, monetary authorities, they tried to see that you have to adopt more flexible rules for money growth. You'll see later on that Friedman had argued that you should have a constant money growth rule. Money supply should grow at a constant rate every year. They said, no, no, you can't do this. You can do this only if velocity of money is constant. If it becomes flexible, this constant rule cannot work. You have to directly target inflation. If inflation is rising, reduce the purchasing power by reducing money supply. Once you move towards deflation, increase aggregate demand by increasing money supply. So money supply should be flexible. So this was one school. The other school, on the other hand, continued to say that money is too important to be left to the central bank. By and large, what we can say is that specific policy recommendations have lost importance. When Friedman is saying that you should go only for monetary policy, you should fix the money supply growth, those are no longer important. But his framework, that has become part of the economic theory. It's like you can say it's like a jigsaw. Do you know what is a jigsaw puzzle?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so what you have is you have some pieces. You put them together. Keynes put them together, and he got the picture of a house, let us say. He got the picture of a depression. Friedman also brought some additional pieces. And when it was added to the Keynesian part, we got the picture of what happens in a different economic situation. So it's something like this. You have a very... this is the actual square. You don't have all the pieces. The classicals built up this much. Keynes added this much. The monetarist added this. Rational school added this. The structuralists added this. And we are gradually moving to understanding different parts of the picture. But if I say that only this is correct and I ignore all the others, I'm wrong. So the Friedman's monetary theory is becoming part of the macroeconomic theory. Rule-based monetary policy is becoming popular, but at the same time, we do realize that money supply has a role in controlling inflation. Fiscal policy has its limitations, and this led to the development of the neoclassical economics. Okay, I'll just take 2 minutes. I'll just go through 2 slides, which I'm going to cover again tomorrow. So this neoclassical economist was also another critic of the Keynesian school. Okay. Similar to the classical argument, economists, they argued, or similar to Friedman, they argued that policy intervention was not justified. It actually destabilized the economy. The private sector was such that they could absorb the shocks. If any shock occurred, there was an initial period of disequilibrium, but if you left things alone, the private sector would adjust and bring the economy back to the long run equilibrium level. So this part was similar to the monetarist criticism. But the neoclassicals argued that the Keynesian theory was not consistent internally. They argued that Keynes was using very ad hoc behavioral functions, like the consumption function. Have you discussed the consumption function? Or is it in your next semester? Upanita?
So, consumption function, sir, regarding... So,
Ando
we have-
Modigliani, Dusenberry.
No, sir.
Okay. So as you will see later on, Keynes had simply assumed that C equal to A plus BY. Okay. If you want to make it more complicated, A plus B within brackets Y minus T. The new classical economics argued that you have to develop these functions, consumption function, investment function, savings function, money demand function, based on household optimization models. So all the households face an optimization problem, and when they solve these functions, these optimization problems, they get a consumption function, savings function, firms get an investment function. You must aggregate these investment functions for the households or for the firms. You must aggregate the behavioral functions to get the macroeconomic functions, not take an ad hoc function. That was the fundamental criticism of the new classical approach. The second proposition was that the economy tends to remain near full employment level. You can have short-run shocks and the economy will move away, but it is self-adjusting, just as in the classical case. Robert Lucas led this new classical economic revolution. Thomas Sargent, Edward Prescott, Neil Wallace, they were the other people. Okay. So in the next class, we are going to turn to the new classical economics and see how is it different from the Keynesian model, and what are the policy recommendations of this new classical economics. And we will see that what are the broad issues on which what are the policy problems, limitations on fiscal and stabilization policy.
Sir, could you show the conclusion site once?
এটা বন্ধ করে দিয়েছি। By the way, please don't leave the class because I'm going to take a roll call now. This one.
Sir, graph মানে ওই তিনটে এরিয়া yes sir, this one.
Sir, here why were we using M1? Sir, why not M2 or M3?
কোথায় M1 পাচ্ছ?
Sir, this velocity ratio means in the book it is given as M1 velocity ratio.
Sorry, just 1 minute, please. So what is M1 কেন নিচ্ছি? দেখো যে যারা অ্যানালাইজ করেছে তারা M1 নিয়েছে, M2 M3 নিলেও we will get a rough trend, a trend which is similar to this. And this is I think M1A, I think you have the saving, you have the liquid money. That is why M1 is taken. So sorry. মানে if you're taking the other M2s, M3s, you're also including term deposits. মানে যেগুলোকে আমরা what we are calling fixed deposits. So fixed deposit again means that it is becoming somewhat closer to bonds. Money is losing its liquidity. So if you want money as a liquid asset, you should take M1. ঠিক আছে অয়ন?
Yes, sir.
If I took M3 for instance, হয়তো অতটা স্টেবল হতো না।
Sir, so the slides after that graph, sir, those were like the problems that people faced with the monetarist counter revolution. That's why the new classical model had new classical model had come.
Yeah, so I'm saying that okay, after 79, after 86, how was the monetarist school changing? So they did say that okay, you can't rely on fiscal stabilization. They continue to say that central bank has limitations. You will see what the limitations are. But instead of Friedman's constant money growth policy, I mean, they realized that a rule-based monetary policy, it became popular, but still that too had some limitations. Okay. They also said that, okay, money supply has a role in controlling inflation. Okay, so the others, please leave. I want to Upanita and Kritika, please stay back.
Okay, sir.
The others may please leave.